Well, obviously what I talk about in my book is what happened for sure to me. It's not anything that's speculation. It's not something that may or may not have happened. It's what I went through, and it's everything that I put in there is legit. Everything that I said happened. And I wasn't putting it in there to, kick up dust now, years later. It was, hey, this is my story, this is what I went through. But because of the speculation of what's going on with, Mauro and JBL, what may or may not be, because of that, it ties into the facts that I talk about from everything that I went through. So in that era, culture as far as the locker room enforcer and all of that, and his cabinet, JBL, and he had a cabinet on TV, he had a cabinet behind the scenes, and they made life hell for me. It wasn't like good-natured, fun ribbing. It was hell for a long time. That could have easily been stopped by management because management was well aware of what was going on, and it wasn't. Management there wasn't the type to say, we don't allow that kind of thing here. It was more like, that's great. Obviously, in the story that I tell with my passport being taken out of my bag and getting stuck in England, when I came back to Vince McMahon making a joke about it because he loves that kind of stuff. He loves that kind of ribbing. To him, that's ribbing, and he doesn't care what it does or how it affects people. So as far as the locker room enforcer, like a JBL type in the cabinet, I don't think that goes on anymore. I mean, that was in 2003, and I talk in the book about like once Tommy Dreamer came in and just how it was a different group of people and how things really changed. But at the same time, people are talking about like fire JBL, and I'm not looking to get JBL fired, and firing won't do anything. They've fired guys in the past just to, take the heat off the company for a short time. Basically, that's just the culture there. There's a bullying culture, bullying mentality from upper management, and it goes down from upper management, and that does go on in many different forms. There are many different forms of bullying, and the constant threat of heat. That's something that's real, and it's something that upper management uses all the time to keep people in line, and that's something that still goes on. So while the JBL type of stuff behind the scenes isn't what it used to be, there's still bullying that goes on, and obviously if the speculation is that he was bullying Mauro, and if that happened, then that happened. So I don't know because I wasn't there. So it's even though it's outdated from 2003, still very much relevant.
Absolutely, yeah. And if it happened in your life,
that was a lot.
Oh, I followed you. I followed you every step of the way, every syllable, every word you said, because it might have happened in 2003, but it doesn't matter if it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. It's going to have a lasting impact on your life, especially if it was felt to be in a negative light at that point. Now, in 2003, we're not too far apart, I don't think, in terms of age. So I know that you were very young coming into the wrestling business. Obviously, it was your dream, and the book is going to detail how your dream came true. But, we've heard things in the past. We've interviewed Rene Dupree, who suffered some of the same tactics coming into the company around the same time, maybe a little bit after, but, at a very young age. So obviously, maybe not with the best, not head on his shoulders, but maybe not the right advice going in. So there was obviously somewhat of a target or some kind of a type, but, did you feel like any of the defense mechanisms you had at that point were helping, or was it until a guy like Tommy Dreamer came into the locker room that really was there by your side and was somebody that you can kind of go to and, be like, hey, this has to stop?
There was nothing that I could do to stop it. I just took it thinking, okay, you just take it and it goes away. You're not supposed to sell it. Just keep going. And I kept taking it and taking it and taking it. It never went away. Over time, I just think they realized that I wasn't going anywhere and I wasn't going to do anything. So eventually, it kind of went on in the background. And then once Joey Styles and JBL had their altercation on that plane, that's when, shortly after, JBL was gone. And that's when the problems really just, everything started to change.
And it's amazing to see how the locker room has changed so much, and everybody always talks about it. You talk to the older guys, they say, oh, well, it's not the same. You talk to the newer guys, they love it. We get to see kind of a fostered friendship, a kinship, if you will, with the guys that are all coming through the Performance Center together. You can kind of tell how much they really root for each other, whereas even in 2003, business was a tad bit more cutthroat. But as you were on your way out, did you definitely see that difference in the locker room between 2003 and obviously when you left the company?
I mean, then it opened up a whole new ballgame, because there's the guys who worked for a long time to get there and got there and were kind of being thrown to the side because Hunter was just trying to take care of the NXT guys and kind of, I don't want to say holding down, but holding down the other guys and just trying to put the NXT guys in. And the NXT guys were coming in. They weren't coming in and, shaking everybody's hands and doing what everybody else did who came before them. So now you have these guys who came in who were at an advantage because they were Hunter's guys. So it created for an interesting workplace.
The common theme that we've been running into a lot on this show is that 10 years ago or 15 years ago, Triple H is the guy who was known as the barrier of talent. Now he's known as the foster father of professional wrestling and bringing back a lot of your favorites, making sure a lot of these new guys, these top indie guys, are now getting into the company at some point. So it's kind of weird to see the journey that you're booking.
Well, yeah, but that's the people on the outside who look at him and think that he is this hero that he portrays himself to be by bringing certain guys back and by pushing guys. And, everyone thinks, oh, Vince is ruining the company, but Hunter's trying to do what's best for the company. But as somebody who's been there and who knows that is not entirely true at all, and knowing what he's done to a lot of the talent that's there and kept them down to make his NXT talent look better, I can say he's not the savior and not the hero that the internet portrays him to be, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah, so what happened? I mean, where is this? I mean, this came out of the blue, and, John and I, as being more of the old school fan or, guy, we have more connection to, I guess you can't even say, I mean, it's tough to say older because, we're in that same generation that you are, but this was not a guy who was the friend of the wrestling fan or the internet wrestling fan, especially, and it's completely changed. But was it this?
Yeah, this is the guy who's making fun of the indie guys that he's now taking pictures with. But all of a sudden now, when I think they realize that the football players and these guys who didn't know anything about wrestling that they were hiring for the Performance Center, when that wasn't going so well, and he just turned to the guys that were already over, and that way it made him look good to the internet, and the internet has accepted him because he's running with the guys that the internet pushes, which there's a lot of great guys. It's not to say anything bad on those guys. It's just he was never for that in the past, and then all of a sudden now he's a different guy.
John and I actually went over off air. We were doing some show prep a few weeks back. We went through the list of the guys that in one pay-per-view span of about 6 months, around 2002, the beginning of 2003, that he just beat. He just beat 1, 2, 3. Now all these guys are going in the Hall of Fame and they're legends. But what was the big thing that really was that stood out to you with him and this internet wrestling fandom kind of turning the corner? Was there one particular thing that he did that really stood out to you that, these fans just don't really see what the real Triple H was all about?
I mean, there's a couple of things that come to mind, which I talk about in the book. When he was going to be wrestling The Undertaker at WrestleMania, he basically said that he went in the locker room and he looked around and there was nobody for him, nobody at his level besides The Undertaker. So here's the guy who's in charge of building the talent, saying that no talent is up to his level, and that's why he had to fight The Undertaker at WrestleMania. At the same time, when they did that storyline with the roster walking out on the company, he basically came in the ring and said how everybody's outside, but you could have a better match with a broomstick than most of the guys out there anyway. I mean, he's always doing whatever it takes to make himself look like Superman and to put everybody else down. He's probably the most insecure person I've ever met. He constantly needs people around him telling him how great his ideas are and laughing at his jokes. And he buries talent. He really buries talent, but then he could cover up because now he's putting over his talent, and you can't say that he's burying talent because he's putting certain talents over.
Now, with Triple H, the funny thing is, and I don't think these newer fans realize this, he's kind of saying him being on the same level as Taker, or him thinking he's on the same level as Taker, is kind of, I wouldn't say laughable, but close to it, just from longevity, being a main eventer, stuff like that, because Triple H was never the guy. He was always the guy who worked as a...
Yeah, that's what all of the guys will tell you, too. A lot of the guys will tell you that.
It's just funny how, like, almost revisionist history, because, you know, in the position he's in, The Rock was the guy, Steve Austin was the guy, and Triple H was the guy working with those guys. So wouldn't you say it's basically almost revisionist history?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And they create this role for him to be the top guy because nobody's going to challenge it. That's what Vince pushes, and that's what he pushes, so he's always the best.
Yeah, think about it. He beat Sting a couple years ago. Even Hall and Nash were quoted as saying that was insane, that obviously Sting should have won. He beat Goldberg at one point when Goldberg was at his hottest. He beat Lesnar when Lesnar came back.
He beat Brock, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
He has to beat everybody because he's always the best. He's the guy.
It's funny. The one guy throughout the years there that refused the job to him was Hogan, and that's just great because Hogan said he wasn't quite at his level. And I know I always thought that was funny. You know, Hogan was the one guy with political power over him. You know, Booker T, Kane, Scott Steiner, RVD, all those guys, Jericho at one point, all those guys that kind of, you know, are looked at by us as such great stars, but he had to beat them. Do you think that was the case, that he just, you know, he has to beat those guys?
Yeah, of course, because he has to be the best.
Well, you know, I could keep going on and on naming guys he buried, but I want to, you know, tie it back into the book and kind of go over that. You know, it's kind of getting a little bit of think that it's a controversial book, but I don't think it's very controversial at all. It's more your story. Do you think
the only people who say it's controversial are people who haven't read it. If you've read it, then you know that it's an honest story, and everybody who's read it has said it's fair, it's balanced, because it is. It's not controversial. I mean, if it's giving you new information that maybe you didn't know about, and that's one thing, but it's not meant to be controversial. It's just an honest story, and people sometimes aren't used to hearing the truth, because when you come out with the truth, like the stuff we were just talking about, the Triple H, it's like, oh, you're bitter, or what do you know? But when you're there and you see everything happen, you can just honestly say from a first-hand perspective, this is what it's like. And if people are going to argue about it, they weren't there. But also, you don't hear a lot of people saying those kinds of things because nobody wants to upset Triple H. I mean, he's like the top guy behind the scenes at the company. So you don't want to upset him because, you know, all these guys and girls want to go back, and they don't want to make waves. They don't want to upset anybody, so they just don't really say anything.